for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Mrs. Rudolph? Here. Mr. Preston? Here. Mr. Diaz?
Here.
Mrs. Kim Parsons? Here. Dr. Hinkleman? Here.
So we'll give Mr. Larson a chance to settle, but so maybe in the meantime we can talk a date for the organizational meeting.
Okay. We got the organizational meeting needs to happen by the 15th of January. That is for January.
Yep, so a couple of things to consider. The organizational meeting has to happen by the 15th, and then I have to have the tax budget submitted by January 20th, but we can approve the tax budget at the organizational meeting, so.
Maybe the 6th, 7th.
6th?
6th.
So far so good.
The excitement.
Monday, January 6th. What time do you want to start?
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Sold.
6 or 9?
6.
6.
Okay.
6, that's 6.
Okay.
All right. So just for information's sake, I think at our last board meeting, there were some questions about some of our ESC programs. We thought it would be worthwhile to reach out and give Mr. Larson, Superintendent of the Miami County ESC, an opportunity to talk through not only the programs, the consortium programs, but also the business model that they follow, and really how we're all kind of centered on the same thing, and that is providing the best services possible for the least costs to maximize efficiency. And we have great partnership with the ESC, and whichever direction you want to take us now, Mr. Larson, be fine.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you guys. It's funny. I've suggested to multiple superintendents that I'd love an opportunity to sit down with the board and talk a little bit about how we operate and what we do, and this is probably only the second time I've been able to do it. So I appreciate your time, and I'll try not to take up too much of it. So I thought about bringing my PowerPoint presentation that goes through the history of ESCs, but I figured you guys probably would be okay without all that. So, but I will give just a little bit of background information, because even though you guys have done business with us for a really long time, I think there's a lack of understanding a lot of times about what ESCs are and what we do and how we operate. So there are 51 ESCs in Ohio. There is a form of an educational service center. They're called ESAs, and general educational service agencies, in all 50 states. So we exist in some form or fashion everywhere. Historically, we were the County Board of Education. So up until 1992, I believe, we were county boards of education. Our primary purpose was to provide governance to the local schools. So in Ohio, you'll see there are 3 types of traditional public schools: city schools, local schools, and exempted villages like West Milton. So we actually were the governing body for local schools. It used to be that there were just local schools and city schools, and some communities wanted to have their own board of education, so they became exempt from the county board of education. That's how we came up with the name exempted village, which a lot of people don't know. So we did that, and during that time period, we really started in Miami County to focus a lot of our energies on providing services to students with special needs. So in like I said, in the 90s, we transitioned away from being the county boards of education, became educational service centers. And in Ohio, educational service centers are a blended model of state funding and fee-for-service. That being said, our direct funding from the state is very, very limited. So it makes up about 5% of our budget. So we get about 5% of our annual budget revenue comes in state support. Everything else is a fee-for-service model, which means that districts enter into a contract with us and we provide that service to the district. So we have about 380 employees that serve Miami County and Vandalia. We do a lot of work with Vandalia. We hire all of their paraprofessionals now. We're close to it, right? So we have a lot of employees who are in Vandalia, but the majority of our work is here in Miami County. And about 70% of the work we do is provide services to students with complex special needs. So we do that in preschool all the way to graduation. So by federal law, when a child turns 3 years old, if they're suspected of having a disability, the district where they reside is responsible to do an evaluation and determine if they are eligible for in one of the disability categories. And if they are, the district is required to educate that child starting at age 3. We provide that special education opportunity for all the school districts in Miami County. So we do that in a consortium-based model. We have about 22, 23 classrooms throughout the county. We have 2 here in Milton-Union. So those classrooms are considered preschool disability classrooms. We do have some students who are not identified with this disability. Unfortunately, in the state of Ohio, they're called typical students, which I think is a terrible name because there are no typical students. But we do have a handful, about 4 or so in each of our classrooms that are typical students, and that's a tuition-based program. So those families do pay a pretty nominal tuition for those students to be in our program. We do receive some federal funds for preschool students that are directed to the ESC, and we use that to offset our personnel cost. I'm going to talk about our business model here in just a second of our consortium programs. Then school-age programs, we have school-based special education classrooms that are for kindergarten through graduation. I say graduation because a child is identified with a disability. They're eligible to receive education until their 22nd birthday. So we do have some senior plus kiddos in our programs. And we have 33 classrooms throughout the county for students with complex needs. Most of those kids are in classrooms that we would qualify as multiple disability classrooms. So a lot of kids with significant autism, again, multiple disabilities. There may be physical disabilities, anyone. There are, I want to say, around 15 disability categories in the state. So multiple disabilities meaning they have more than one disability. And in those classrooms, again, for the most part, we serve kids that are exclusively in that community. So Milton-Union and Tip City are two districts that is a little bit different because we do serve students from Newton in our Milton-Union classrooms here. We have 3 classrooms that qualify in that category, and Tip City hosts Bethel students as well. So we do have some that go across, and then we have a separate facility, which is called the Cooperative Learning Center, which is housed at Riverside, and we have 2 classrooms that are at the Lincoln Center in Troy. And those are for students whose disabilities are so significant that they really can't be met in a traditional district. In those classrooms, we have 11 classrooms. 8 of those are targeting students who who have emotional disturbances. So that would be typically the identification for students in those classrooms. In addition to the direct service to kids through consortium-based classrooms, we also provide related services. So we provide speech therapy and occupational therapy to the kiddos in the county who require that. Now, we don't have a speech therapist in every district. Milton-Union does hire your own speech therapist. And you guys do purchase occupational therapy services from us, and maybe one day of speech this year,
Yeah.
or last year and this year. And so those folks, because a student with a disability may require occupational therapy, speech therapy, or physical therapy to access their education, we have those folks that provide those services. In addition to that, we have some positions that districts just choose to employ through us. So we have a social worker here in Milton-Union per the district request. We also employ a number of paraprofessionals here in Milton-Union, and that's done for multiple reasons in different districts. Sometimes a paraprofessional is hired through us because a student needs a one-to-one aid, and the district would like the flexibility of not having to commit to that long term. They hire the paraprofessionals through us, and then the next year they just say we no longer need that service, and then that person is our employee, and we find new opportunities for them. So that's kind of a general idea of what we provide in terms of special education. We also do literacy work with districts. So we have literacy consultants who work with our districts. We have resource coordinators who are working in the districts to basically identify areas of to work with families who have some sort of non-academic barriers that are impacting their child's ability to be successful in school. We actually have those positions, that's through a partnership with JFS. We don't have to bill anything for those, which is nice. It's fully funded through TANF dollars with the county. We do attendance services, so we have an attendance officer, and then we also have a resource coordinator that's dedicated solely to attendance that provides services to all the districts in the county. So that's a little bit of what our work looks like. With regards to, and I need 7 copies. I don't know if that's right now.
That'll be
Okay, I'm gonna pass those around. So I'll walk this. Hopefully, these will help kind of walk through, how we come up with our costs and operate our programs. So we look at each of these special education programs as kind of individualized entities. So we'll talk about our preschool, for example. What we do, we have 20-some preschool classrooms throughout the county. We take our total cost to operate all 20-some of those preschool classrooms. So that's going to be all the teachers, all the paraprofessionals, all the related service hours that are dedicated to it, supervision, school psychology services, because every time a kiddo turns the age 3 and there's a suspicion of a disability, our school psychologists are the ones who conduct that evaluation. We take the total cost that it takes to run that program, and we divide it by the number of kids. And then we come up with a per student cost for that program. Now, preschool is a little bit different for 2 reasons. One, we do get, like I mentioned earlier, we do get some federal dollars for IDEA money for preschool that we reduce that cost by the federal dollars we get. So we subtract that from the total cost, and we come up with a per student amount. The other reason that preschool is a little bit different is students start preschool at different times. So once a child turns 3, so they become eligible. And so we have a lot, so our preschool numbers, we start off the year with maybe, don't quote me on this, 325 preschool students in all of our programs. We may finish the year with 450. So we add preschool kids throughout the year. So we only charge for days of service. So if a child enters halfway through the year, that's a prorated amount that the district gets billed for those costs. We do the same thing for our, so where it talks about our ESC units, those are our classrooms that we have out in district. We do the same thing. So if we have 33 classrooms, we take the total cost of operating those 33 classrooms, and we come up with the per student cost. Now, we do charge an administrative fee. We charge 4.5%. I will say it is the lowest administrative fee of all ESCs in the state. There are others that are 4.5%. There's nobody who's lower than 4.5%. We do charge 4.5% administrative fee on salary and benefits for our programs. We do not charge it for all programs. We just charge it on salary and benefits, and that is what we use for operational costs that go into operating this program. So HR coordinator, technology support, all those things. We use those to that 4.5% to factor into operating our organization, our business. And that's how we do our classrooms that are housed in district, our preschool, our cooperative learning center. It's also how we do our related services. So we take the total cost, we come up with a day rate, and then so if you have 4.5 days of occupational therapy, you pay for 4.5 days of occupational therapy a year. That's 4.5 days a week. The benefit of that is you don't have to pay 4.5 days. You're not paying 5 days for that staff. There's some benefit to our districts in having this shared cost. So we may have a teacher in, let's say, Tip City, who has 35 years of experience and a master's degree, who's getting paid $80,000 a year with benefits, and that teacher might take family insurance. So we might be talking about a staff member of $115,000 or whatever, 120. Thank you. Where we might have a teacher in, let's flip that around. Let's say that's here. We may have a teacher in Tip City then, who is a brand new teacher, still on their parents' insurance, which is a reality, right? In the age we're in right now. Tip City's not paying less money than Milton-Union by having a less expensive employee. So by having that consortium-based program allows for you to share that cost, and more expensive employees aren't going to cost more money. Now, the alternative is true as well, right? Like if you have a brand new person, you're not saving money by having a brand new person. But that does allow us to kind of share in the risk of the total cost. And then if you reference this document here, if you look at social workers, so Mark is the social worker. That is his cost, his salary and benefits with a 4.5% administrative fee, and that's it. So we have some positions that are not consortium-based positions. So for Milton-Union, all of your paraprofessionals, your social worker, your SBA, none of those are consortium-based pricing. We're gonna bill you the actual cost of those employees, because there are not enough people in those programs to build that out into a consortium-based program. The other reason, there are some positions like school psychology, we don't do that because districts set the rate of pay for school psychologists, because it's really hard to find school psychologists. So districts will say, we'll say this is what we think it's going to cost to hire this person. They say pay it or don't pay it, and we go from there. We don't have set prices. So we don't say it's $40,000 to have a student in one of our consortium-based classrooms. We charge actual cost, for good or bad. I will say if we charged actual, if we set prices and we said this is what it costs to have somebody in this program, we're going to have to charge more because we can't, we're operating on not a lot of money from the state. So if we had to set our prices before the school year started and said this is what it's going to cost, we're going to have to make sure we don't lose money on that. So by charging actual costs for most of our programs this way, it allows us to have real costs that we share among the people in the consortium. There are some things that have been a little bit different. So for example, our literacy, we used a new business model or funding model for that. We had tiers of services, which is something we're trying a little bit different now with some of those programs because there are services you're receiving that are not direct through the literacy work. We have a literacy collaborative. We have some different things that you're getting from that. So in order to try to sustain that was something that we implemented during with some of the COVID money that we did receive some direct COVID money from the state. We did put that 100% back into services that we provide to our district. We try to do things a little bit maybe more creatively there. So the funding that we get directly from the state, we get $26 per student of the districts that are aligned to us. So every 2 years, you guys have an opportunity to decide which ESC you want to align with. And the only thing that matters with regards to alignment is who receives the state subsidy for the students in Milton-Union. So you guys do work with Montgomery County, because we don't sell PT services. So you guys buy your PT services. You guys have done some other work with Montgomery County. You guys can work with any ESC across the state that you want to. The alignment allows us to receive funding from the state to be able to operate, basically. So we get $26 per student from the districts that are aligned to us, and we use that for operational costs. We have about 16,000 students in Miami County. We get $6.50 that is deducted from your foundation that goes to us. So by law, every school district under a certain number of students, which basically means that like there are 10 or 12 schools that are big enough in the state that are not required in law to align with an ESE, every school district has to align to an ESE, and then there's $650 that's deducted from their foundation that goes to us. We do not keep that money. We credit that money back to you guys in services. So when we sit down with Carrie and Brad and we talk about our costs, so we're getting ready to do this. We're going to take this sheet. This is last year's sheet. We're getting ready to do this in December. We're going to take our costs for this year and say this is what it looks like. We sit down and we show. So for example, in Milton-Union last year, 1,283 students, $650 per student. That's $8,400. Is you start off with a credit of that amount of money. So we don't keep that $650. We credit that to you guys in services. We also credit you $10,000. It's a strange number. $10,700, $10,300. There was a reason that we started at one point in time in rent fee. So if we have classrooms that we're operating in your district, you get rent, which is reflected on this document as well. Credit for ESC classrooms. So $40,000 you guys are getting back in rent, and that's just kind of a way. So no criticism of any of our districts here, but Newton doesn't host any of our classrooms. So Milton should get something for having those classrooms, and so you get $40,000 in credited and for rent. So we sit down in the spring and we look at this document 2 significant times a year. We look at it in the fall, we look at it in the spring. In the spring, we look at next year's programming, and we usually bring in, have some conversations with the special ed coordinators and districts and say, okay, these students are probably going to continue to be in your programs. We're probably going to be looking at 3.5% increase in our staff costs, and we come up with a dollar amount that we think we're projecting you guys to spend with us the next year, and we enter into a contract for additional money above the $650 to be deducted from your foundation payment. So that way, so we go into a contract with you guys, and that way we don't have to bill for this every single month. What we do is we get foundation payments that are redirected from the district to us. And then we look at those throughout the year and say, okay, we're projected, we did pretty well. It looks like we're going to be pretty close to even at the end of the year. We have this is the conversation we'll have here in December, or we'll say, ooh, we overshot, and we're going to need to lower that deduct because you guys are overpaying us. Or while you're under, we may want to look at that. We may want to increase that so we can offset that. And then we have a couple opportunities. You can do that at any time throughout the year. We have these two set times that we look at it, and then we actually shore up in June. So we take, okay, here was our actual cost, based on the projections that we had. 30 people not taking insurance has a huge impact on cost. 30 people taking family insurance has a huge impact on cost. So some of those are just projections until we can finalize things at the end of the year. We come up with our final costs, and then we settle up in the summer, and we say, okay, we were pretty close. You guys may owe us $25,000, or we may owe you. That'd be really close, right?
Is there any benefit in doing it that way? Having the money redirected from our foundation payments to BSC, is there any benefit?
So there's a benefit to us because it's guaranteed revenue that comes in throughout the year that we're not having to utilize our fiscal staff to invoice and collect and bill and do all that. For the district, same thing. I mean, it's less. It's human labor involved in that process.
I'm just looking. I mean, it's a large sum of money. And
Yeah.
If there was a one payment a year, then there could be potential revenue and investments on the money.
Yeah, one payment a year. So that wouldn't be an option for us. We wouldn't be able to make payroll if we did that with all of our districts. Yeah, we do have we did have a district who was still having us do monthly invoices up until this year, and they've made the change to this because again we have to collect revenue throughout the year.
Sure.
That's a good question. I don't know if that had anything to do with what you guys wanted to hear, but it is it's a lot of money to spend with an organization, and I will say this: special education costs are very significant right now.
I'd like to just go over. I mean, so the preschool. I mean, we're $435,000 and change, and that's a significant amount of money. I guess if you don't mind addressing the state mandates that are imposed upon us as a district to educate the kids starting at age 3 through 22. Because that's a big expense to the district.
Sure.
I'm not sure people fully understand the costs of the district that go beyond the kids in the seats.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually federal law that requires it's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that requires public schools to educate students with disabilities starting at age 3 till their 22nd birthday. So that's in federal law, which there are a few components of we call it IDEA. There are a few components, and one is that a child who is suspected of having a disability is assessed and determined if they have a disability. If they do, that child is entitled to have an IEP, an individualized education program, which drives the decisions that the district makes with regards to that child. So those kids who have an IEP, students who are identified with disability, again, federally protected class of individuals. That's the only group, and that's the only group that is really federally. You're really federally dictated to educate. Statewide, you're required to educate a lot of kids, but federally, it's really students with disabilities. they're entitled to what they call FAPE, free and appropriate public education, which means that you provide an educational experience that meets that student's IEP in the least restrictive environment. So that child's experience should be as similar to a student without a disability as possible while still meeting their needs. So with students who are, it's hard to talk generically about kids, but students who may be nonverbal, who may have significant cognitive delay, who also may have some physical aggression. We may have a situation where there are there's a classroom teacher. And one of the things to keep in mind, I know Brad had mentioned, looking at some other districts that do their own preschool programs, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So you're gonna have a teacher, you're gonna have at least two paraprofessionals in those classrooms. Sometimes there might be a one-on-one paraprofessional in there as well, because that's what's written into the student's individual education plan program. And then that child might also receive speech therapy and occupational therapy. And so in order to have all the staff you would need to educate this one child, you're looking at a payroll of $200,000 because of how significant the needs are. That's kind of an extreme example, but it's not an example that's uncharacteristic of kids that we serve.
And there are some kids
Yeah.
that you can't serve because you don't have people qualified to handle their disability.
Sure. So we do. We're serving.
But we have some students we have to transfer to
Yes.
special schools.
Yes, correct.
Cost additional.
Yep, and that's going to cost additional money. And so I'm going to.
Another thing to clarify, I don't think people realize with an IEP, if it's stated in that, like you're obligated.
You're legally bound by federal law to
Yes.
to adhere to it.
And I think we have some people who would look and they would see the amount of what it takes to educate that kid with the IEP. And I'm like, that is a lot of money for that
Yeah.
one kid, but you're obligated.
You are. You're legally bound
Yeah.
to do so. Interestingly, and this is a side note, our state organization partnered with some other entities to do an analysis of special education costs in the state of Ohio. So worked with the OEPI, I think is the name of the organization. The findings were that we have there's a $1 billion gap in what it costs to educate students with disabilities and what the state is funding you to educate students with disabilities. So there are weighted factors with regards to each of the disability categories. Actually, there are 4 disability categories that have weights associated with them. All the categories are lumped into 4 different categories, and I think there are 4, and there are weights associated with each one of those. Those are undervalued to the point that it's costs local taxpayers in the state of Ohio $1 billion to make up that difference. So I'm guessing in Milton, the state funds about 45%, makes up about 45% of your revenue that you need to educate kids, and that's about average, right? So for a student with disability, the state's only making up about 25% of that. Local taxpayers are covering the difference. So special education costs are super significant right now.
Would you say there's a trend increasing the amount of,
Yes.
of kids with disability? And can you give us a ballpark as to what that trend is over the last 4 or 5 years as far as percentage increases?
So
I'm not
yeah.
holding you to
No.
like the numbers.
Yeah, so here's a relevant point. We're serving about 60 more kids in our preschool through school age program this year than we were last year at this time. So, and that's out of about 500 some kids over. So 50 to 60 kids is a pretty significant increase. And that's been pretty that's been pretty consistent.
Are you
now,
saying that's more in like the younger ages, like 3 years
Yes.
old, or?
It's our preschool numbers are up
Okay.
significantly, and our early elementary numbers are up significantly. I won't, speculate on why that is, but that's been the trend that we're seeing, that our numbers with our younger kiddos are up significantly. Now, just because a child is, the whole concept of the preschool requirement is that it's early intervention, is that you're able to provide the services at an early age that by the time that they're school age, they may not require as significant services. But we also operate in a situation where a disability is not a temporal thing. You have, if a person has a disability, they don't grow out of it. I mean, it's not, statistically, they're going to have that disability.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How does the fund flow through from the
So you know how you guys
Say
get,
instituted it
Yeah.
to school districts, are they compensated?
so for, you guys know how you guys get Title I dollars or IDA dollars from the federal government? If you look at, when you the CCI, through the CCIP, we get that, so that gets redirected to us from the feds. We sign off on that, and that money, instead of going to the district, goes to us. I don't know if that answers your question. So it actually flows through the Department of Ed in Ohio. It doesn't go directly to schools or to us. All federal dollars flow through the Department of Ed. But we write a plan, and that money comes to us.
So does that get credited
Yes.
at some point?
Yeah, so it's credited to the whole entity. So for preschool, we get, let's say, we get $12,000 from Milton, and 30 from Troy, and 25 from Piqua. It usually works out to be in the ballpark of $80,000 to $90,000 that we get. We reduce that from our total. Yes, we reduce that from our total preschool cost.
That doesn't even come in one time.
No. We hire two to three paraprofessionals with that money.
So, locate, identify, provide the service, mandate, no money with it.
No. That's correct. Now, I will say something real quick, because Brad had asked me about Arcanum, I think maybe, or one of the Dark County schools.
Yeah, then you were talked about the Dark County model.
Yeah. So there are preschool opportunities outside of special education preschool. So in Dark County, several of their public schools have a preschool program. Then they also have a standalone preschool program for students with disabilities. It's called Anthony Wayne. So what they do, and I'm going to pick on Arcanum for a second because they were one of the first districts to do it. Did you? So Arcanum identified the fact that if they operate, open enrollment's huge in Dark County. And there's a lot of competition with open enrollment. So Arcanum realized really early on, if they had a preschool program and other districts didn't, parents would send their kids to Arcanum preschool. Well, then that parent from Franklin Monroe or Tri-Village or whatever would want to stay in Arcanum, and they'd open enroll their kiddo into Arcanum when they're school age. So they developed preschool programs for non-disabled students. The requirements there are a lot different. So licensure for teachers is very different. And I believe in all of the schools of Dark County, but this might not be true, so don't quote me on this. It's a tuition-based program, but it's also locally subsidized. So they do use local tax money to offset the cost of the preschool program, and then they charge the families a tuition as well. That's an option for any school to do. If you do use some tax money, it obviously changes a little bit what the requirements are versus if it's just tuition based. But those options are there. But if the student has an IEP that is required to be met, those kiddos in Dark County will go to Anthony Wayne. They wouldn't stay in the quote unquote public preschool. And that's not a criticism at all. It's a good model. You know, I mean, we have an issue of lack of preschool opportunities for kids in Miami County. And so
then does
We don't have
Arcanum-
an Anthony right now.
no. So we only operate, from a public standpoint, we only operate special education preschool programming with very limited spots for kids with not having disabilities.
So with Arcanum then, are they obligated to pay the enrollment at Anthony?
Oh, yeah. So they're paying, their model for students with disabilities is basically the same as ours, except for it's a standalone building, where ours are all housed in the communities. Most of them are in school, well, about half of them are in schools. We're in a couple churches now. We got booted from some schools because they needed space. So they're still doing special education preschool. They're just doing their own preschool, and there's no real connection there unless there's like itinerant services where they might be, Arcana might be buying some speech services from the ESC to go over and serve a kiddo who's in their not in Anthony Wayne. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Good question.
Is there any thought of building or buying a building for a centralized?
Yes. We do not get funding for facilities. We technically, if I say we don't have taxing authority, that's not 100% accurate. We can get taxing authority. However, we have to have, there's a whole process we have to go through, and no ESC that I know of in the state of Ohio has effectively passed a tax on its population, because we would be competing with you guys on the ballot, which probably wouldn't be good business sense for us. So we don't get any funding for facilities, and we don't get any we don't have taxing authority. So we've had a lot of conversations of, you know, could we finance a building? You know, is there a big building that's perfect for us to move into? You know, I'm very interested in what happens with the Troy buildings and their building project. Very interested in the Tip City facility project, because there are a couple potential schools that could be opportunities for us. If you have any ideas, I'm super open to it, because we would need to serve about 500 preschool kids when it's all said and done. Or at our separate facility for school-age kids, which is more feasible, we would need to serve about 60 kids. So that's more practical than a preschool.
But the downside for the district would be if it moves out of in-house, we then have to transport.
Yeah, there's nothing easy to do this.
Everything's a ripple.
Yeah. One of the things we do is, well, I didn't mention earlier, we do the Business Advisory Council for Miami County. So Brad participates on that, and I'm trying to think of if there are any Milton-Union businesses that are on our BAC. So we have our Career Connections work that is also part of that. So we have a person who basically works with our districts to provide, you know, Career Connections support, and we also have a career navigator that work out of that office. Which I want to bring up. It's a small component of our work, but it's pretty public facing. A lot of our businesses are very familiar with the Career Connections work through Miami County ESC. Other questions? Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you guys, and hopefully I didn't bore you too much. But we are always more than happy to come out and have a conversation about what we do.
Oh, very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Dave, you could run right out of here if you want to.
No, that's, I might have to go back to the office. So, Covington's right down the road. Thanks, see you guys.
Okay, so just big picture, because there are some personnel issues that, you know, and the costs of personnel and programs that we'll discuss in executive session, but big picture on a levy discussion. Are there feelings from the board on the term of the levy? Are we gonna, so what I'm gathering over the course of several meetings is that we're electing to put something on the ballot in May. What that is, we're not sure yet, but in terms of the term, I mean, are we gonna continue with a 10-year term? Are we looking at 5? What do you think?
I've been looking at 5.
I did have a question. Is there anything on the ballot in May? What is this? Because don't we have to pay for it if nothing else is on the ballot?
We were told that, yes, I talked to Dan about it.
Just want to bring Dan in.
Go ahead.
Dan, you want to just go ahead and
There's
take
something
these
on,
at the end
there's
of the table?
something on the ballot which will make it
Just
cost
statewide.
Yeah.
The state of Ohio is going to be on the ballot in May for extension of the debt capacity. And because of that, they're paying the lion's share of the special election costs.
Okay.
So it's
So it won't
cost
be,
effective.
it won't be a big cost.
Other feelings on term? Just term right now.
I think 5 years, I mean, we're reducing to see if we can get movement one way or the other. So if that creates any additional incentives for individuals to support it, then, which I think, I mean, obviously we were initially a continuing, then we went to 10 years based on the feedback we were getting. Obviously, that didn't pass with the light, or it had a slightly better margin. But as far, I think 5 years seems to make the most sense.
And then the board's appetite for property tax, we're looking at income tax. Again, big picture, income tax.
I guess,
Island towards that.
Carrie, and I don't want to cut anybody off, so if there are comments or questions, but Carrie, at the last meeting, this might be a me problem, I was a little bit surprised by the aggressiveness of the timeline. You had something on the ballot in May. Can we confirm those dates for the 2 board meetings that we have to take an action by?
Sure, so actually I had received a document that I simply Googled it, but I wanted to be sure, so I reached out to our tax attorney. The resolution of necessity has to be done by January 24th. The resolution to proceed has to be done by February 5th. And everything, all of those resolutions have to be to the Board of Elections by 4 p.m. that day, on the 5th. So ideally,
And we have to have 2 resolutions as well.
yes, so to, ideally, you would want you would want a resolution here in December, resolution of necessity. Then you would do your resolution to proceed in January. And then that gives me time to get it up to the Board of Elections.
Do you know of, because I know the passing rate of levies in general wasn't great, but was income tax more successful or less successful than property? Was there a trend in the state?
Brad, what was that thing that you had sent it out?
I'll have to dig it out, man.
I'll send it.
Brad, is there any information that we can find of people who voted no, like what age they are, so we can really hit hard to encourage and just to be able to communicate exactly what the levy is, what the term of the life is, and make sure they understand it? For those people who are on social media, just other ways.
there are companies out there that do data analysis, but
Mhm.
it costs money.
Well, and we do have
And I don't
the
know,
one
I
time
don't
that,
know if we can expend that type of revenue because of our position as the district.
The district certainly would not be able to
No.
fund that.
but can we use any past surveys that we did? Or that the board didn't do, but forget which group that did that.
It doesn't come to mind. I probably need to look through some files and maybe my network drive to see what's out there, but I don't recall anything like that. I mean, we can get at,
Well, you can know who voted, but I don't think you
Yeah.
can know how many voted.
we're amazed
Yeah.
at what you can learn from the Board of Elections. For that matter, the information that is housed by the Board of Elections regarding each voter, but how a voter voted, not so much. You know, whether a voter voted in a particular election or how they're registered, you know, their party affiliation, or you can get at. You might even be able to get at, I'm not sure, some of you may know, but like which ballot issues that voter voted on, but how they voted, no.
Okay.
But I'll look through my things and see if but I don't recall ever doing a survey like that, because we would need somebody who's skilled at research to do that, because we're not going to survey, 7,000 people. We're going to have to get a representative random sample, and somebody with some kind of a research firm or someone with the skills and the tools to be able to do that. That's what we'd be looking for, I think.
Could we talk, recently, there's been a lot of people suggesting we just need to replace our current income tax. Can we go over again why we can't do that?
Sure, so back when Dan and I were working on the spring levy and our different options that we could use, and we kind of talked about this at the last board meeting, we did receive legal opinion, and it is in Ohio Revised Code, that the income tax is backing the bonds. And so when the voters voted, it was voted that 92% of the income tax, or 1.15% of it, they're out a bunch of percentages, whereas to go to PI and the other part, 8%, was to go to general fund. Again, legal opinion, that points directly to Ohio Revised Code. We cannot change that 92% to 8% ratio. What we tried to do back in the spring was that 1.25% income tax. Remember, it was the net effect of a 0.5% increase to the district, but what we were doing is we were dropping the portion of the 1.25% that was going to go to PI, but we were still going to have to keep the 92% and 8% split. You cannot change that because that's what the levy was passed to back the bonds for those.
And that specific income tax has to exist until the school is paid off, or the bonds, right?
Yes, yeah.
In some,
Like if it was an income tax that wasn't tied to our bonds, we could just replace it. I think some people have found that you can replace an income tax, but we can't replace ours because the bonds are
Yeah,
tied to it.
it's backed by the bonds. It backs the bonds.
If the bonds weren't tied to it, then maybe it would have been, we could replace it.
If you had,
If we just had an income tax and we hadn't passed it attached to our bonds.
So let me make sure I'm following. You mean like if we pass something new and then not collect on the old? A complete replacement?
Yeah.
the problem is when someone guaranteed the money, like if you were loaning that money, you would want something to guarantee you're going to get your money back with interest.
Yeah. But that is why
So
we
what
can't
backed
get rid
that
of
was
it.
the revenue stream on the income tax collections. So that's why we just can't be like, oh, let's change it. And that's the issue that I ran into a year ago when I was looking at this route. Again, a brick wall. There's a lot.
Because of the way it was voted in.
Right. So that's why we looked at rolling that back 0.5%, adding 1%, and to the operating fund, 100% going to the operating fund. Which once in the operating fund, there's more flexibility. That's the other thing with PI fund dollars. Once they're in there, it's like a black box. You cannot move them around for other expenses. So that was the idea behind that budget.
mean, from my perspective, I don't like the idea of touching that 1.25% because if the village grows at the rate they're proposing, then we could have a serious overcrowding and need those funds to build new buildings. And I don't want to have to go back to the voters to ask for funds if we have that potentially right now to use it for those purposes. So personally, I didn't like that we were going to do what we were going to do last spring, but I think in the situation we are in now, it's too hard to help people understand that type of move with that income tax. So I think we just either need to do straight income or straight property.
Yeah, and just to further your point, if you watched the last village council, they live stream and I watched play it back.
Yeah.
And they had the developer there and he was talking about the issue of the commercial property. And it sounds like he has a note that he has to pay, right? At what point is he going to just make it more residential?
Right.
I mean, probably sooner than later. I think it's holding off because that was the original plan, but
Right.
I mean, he has to pay his bills and he can't wait forever to get commercial property. And there's the big X factor on the north side of the road. There was commercial in there and now commercial is apartments now. And
What was 1 to 2 bedroom is now 2 to 3 bedroom, and what was non-family apartments are now potentially family apartments.
if you have kids in this district, which I do, it's tight. The gym space is a nightmare in the winter. Pick up your kids at 9:30 for practice because there's just not enough gym time. And normally they're in bed, but, so, you're full now. I think when the school is built, it's pretty full. There's a lot of X factors we don't know. So,
Well, generally speaking, obviously, renewals did better. What the information that I'm looking at, put through BASA, Buckeye Association of School Administrators, that they collected from the state. They look at operating levies, permanent improvement bond and combination levies, income and earning tax levies. So just as a for instance, looking at operating levies, emergency new, or they were 0 for 2 in the state. Emergency renewal were, past 75%, so 21 and 28. Current expense new, again, general operating levy, 4 out of 12. Current expense renewals were 4 out of 5, and the one failing issue failed within 2 votes. So, I mean, generally speaking, renewals fare better. Overall, I think the numbers are not great. So if you consider all 93 ballot issues, I think it was 47 of them passed. That includes, again, new and renewal and all the different types. So that passage rate is just shy of 52%.
I think it's going to be a tough road no matter what we pick.
That'd be great.
So if there aren't, any general questions for Carrie, Dan, or me, I think we're ready to move forward.
Well, are there any stipulations on how many times you can put a ballot initiative on the ballot?
Not for new money, no.
Is there, you're the school finance guy. let's say we sell, and this is getting away, I'm just looking for fun, getting away from the ballot issue, but since you're here, I figured might as well ask you. Let's say we sell a plot of land, let's say we get $500,000 for it. We've had that land forever. Can we use that land can we use the revenue from the purchase or sale of that land for anything? Does it have to go into PI?
I'm going to say no,
Okay.
but there would be some council review to make sure that there wasn't recent funds used that couldn't be, you can't shuffle. You can't buy it from somewhere that's not authorized and then shuffle it to your general fund.
Okay.
So there would be a review to make sure of that. But generally speaking, we'd be fine to. If
Now-
you've had it for a long time and there's no loans, then you're probably fine.
Now, the land that was purchased across the way was purchased with PI funds, so if it was
Right.
sold, that money would have to go back into PI.
But possibly, council. would
50
go
years
through
from
that.
now, we might be on
Right. Council looks at all of that. I can't pretend to know all the factors that come into that.
So you can, if the board would like, we can arrange a conversation with board council. I was able to touch base with Beverly this afternoon. She said that the quick answer, I mean, if we want to dig into it more, I was talking to her while I was in the elementary parking lot, so basically, you can't do it. And if you try to move funds around, I mean, there's a statutory process for that, but it is very involved. And so if we were interested in trying to do that, she said it's really hard. We probably have to engage her with some questions.
To do which thing,
She said we'd have to go to court.
to what?
Like if, so we sold some property
To sell it
and then do something else with it other than use it for permanent improvements or capital improvements.
Would it matter which property, like is,
No.
Yeah.
okay.
But in reality, what's a $500,000 going to do in a $14+ million
It's a
budget?
one-time, it's
Yeah.
one-time.
You could kick the can down the road a little further, that's it. And then it's gone, potentially in a year.
Right.
I mean, this is just a generic discussion, but when I keep looking at numbers and running them, and I look at fiscal year day one, baked in inflation cost, without revenue increasing from the state, and with little growth on the revenue we get on the property side, we're almost always going to be incumbent without any revenue, from day one. Even just when we look at what we've been the last couple of years on insurance inflation, and then the 2 years where we had high inflation everywhere else, it's the baked in is always higher than our increase in revenue.
And the increased mandates from the state,
Federal.
educating kids with disability, the increased amount of kids with disability, we're in a no-win situation.
That's why you see so many districts around the state that have just adopted a cycle. Like so many districts have said, we're on a 5-year cycle, we're on a 3-year cycle. We know we're gonna ask for taxes this many years, this many years, this many years, because there is no way out of, they can't cut all the inflation and keep the program that they want to keep.
So a 5-year cycle is normal? I mean,
I've
that's more
seen-
typical?
I don't know, I can't say it's more typical because there's 3 down inside Dayton proper because you've got county involvement there. So there's a lot of them are in 3 and 4 year cycles, right? 5 I think is more as you get out of the suburbs and a little further out. You see a lot of 5s, but
Cycles are great, you got to be able to pass the levy.
Yeah,
Or
right.
income tax.
right. It just gives you a longer time to talk about why you gotta do it, and you just do it every time, right? Everybody's used to it, but every time it comes up, everybody goes, yeah, we have to do this because there's no other way, right? And so you do it, you do it, you do it again. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because you can cut. When I was a treasurer, I used to say, you can cut all the way down to a 1-room schoolhouse with a wood stove in the middle, and then your costs are gonna start going up again. And sooner or later, you're gonna have to pass another levy. right? Because as long as revenue is flat and expenses are going up, you're gonna have to do something. You can't weather that forever.
It's not even just the fixed expenses though, it's the new mandates coming down from above.
Yeah.
That, it's a great idea, we're gonna fund it for the first 2 years, and then we're taking funding out from underneath it to keep the mandate in. And the growth rate on that cost is 10-12% every year. It's, on 15 million, it's the math.
Dan, have you studied what the legislature is looking at future funding of schools?
Not since the fair funding formula, no. I haven't been involved in the latest. I know they're looking at it again, but I don't know what the next stuff is going to be.
Fair.
Yeah.
I don't think they've talked about it a lot, though. It's not,
No, they
it's not like a
haven't.
priority.
No, they've been tied up on the 23 mil, or the charge off and the 20 mil floor now. It's pretty much taking most of that time.
Well, is there any update on that?
Not anything new. It's the same conversations in circles.
So they're gonna drop it to 15 versus 20?
Yeah, or allow for an increase that, is fixed, so nobody's taxes could go up more than X%. That had some legs for a while versus changing the floor. So even if the floor is 20, that's fine, but still nobody, it's just a hard line. You can't experience a tax increase more than X%. That was in committee for a while.
So they probably use some formula where they come up with a percentage of what district residents should pay towards public education, and then go from there, work backwards. Like if the
You give them more
school.
credit than I do, maybe they,
Well,
I think they were
that's how
more.
you would attack it.
Right, well, you would think, but I think it's more like, if your property value went up 20%, we're going to only let it go up 5. And what does that look like?
So just simple.
Yeah,
No math.
right. The problem they have now in that whole discussion is that at this point, the state has, each county is on its own revaluation schedule. And so there's not an equity across the state. So whatever they would decide to do will be very difficult to adjust fairly or in a way that people are okay with it, because you've got some that have experienced that valuation increase, some that haven't experienced the most recent, or have they? The cycle throws it all off. So whatever they decide to do causes economic hardship in certain regions, depending on where you are in the cycle. So it's going to be very challenging to figure that out.
So we gotta try something. But I say, we plan to, like we're not going to get the money.
Yeah.
I do think a 5-year term seems better than doing 10. I don't know, just knowing that there's like not possibly an end, but just allows to come back and reevaluate in 5 years and see where we're at.
Problem is, we're
Everything.
always going to need
Well, we're
that.
always
Because,
gonna-
I mean,
yeah.
inflation's not going to decrease.
Right.
So it may stay stagnant for a while, but it's not going to decrease. So we're always going to need it. That's why we were looking at it continuing initially, because we were always going to need it. So, it's not like with the operations, we're paying off a bond where we have an end in sight. There's not that.
Yeah, there's not an end, but we just need to get something passed.
Agreed.
And that's the best,
I mean, the 10-year allowed
Right.
for a more strategic plan, given the potential growth in students. I thought we'd be at a point where the TIF and the abatement money we'd have a better idea what that's going out to. The bonds would be almost completely paid off. So then you could reevaluate how much you need in the PI and move forward. That was the idea with the 10-year. But we can do the double evaluation, do it at 5, and then make a decision.
Yeah.
We just won't have the clarity at 5 years that we would have at 10. That's the easiest way to put it.
I agree. And so when we talk about what ideas are as far as amount, if we're doing income, amount, if we're doing property, because, I mean, I know we've obviously cut a lot, and the amount we receive will be determine what services we may be able to bring back in the future. I mean, I would love to bring back some of the busing, but if the revenue's not there, you know, I don't.
I mean, we just try the income again.
I think the 0.75% in 5 years, if it will pass, would allow you to restore some services. What those services are,
We won't
that's
have
where
anything
we
till
would
2026
have
now.
to, they would have to be staged in, like we discussed before, because of the delay in collecting an income tax.
Again, all of this is attached to people and programs, so, I would encourage the board to consider what you should do in the short term, or want to do in the short term regarding deficit spending for, I think it's fiscal year 26. I have that right?
27.
27. So maybe if we drill down on that, then we can get some clarity on what the ask should be in May. And just for the record, I do have a revised code reference if you want to check that out. It's 5705.10 and it's letter H. And again, that speaks to...
Can you repeat that?
Yes, sure. 5705.10 and it's letter H. And this is regarding a school disposing of real property, and how those dollars are directed. I don't know where everybody else is, but I would recommend that we move forward with a motion for executive session.
You guys got anything else for now?
I know. Make a motion to move into executive session.
Let's do your board announcements just real quick.
Sorry, my bad.
Board announcements, next regular board meeting is Monday, December 16th. It's at 6 p.m. in the Media Center. And then, now, we can forward.
Make a motion to move into executive session.
So, I didn't read it.
For a second, sorry. I'm wondering who we're top of you then.
I should have.
Go ahead and read that.
Recommend approval to adjourn to executive session for purposes authorized under BOE policy 0166 and ORC 121.22G1 to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of employee or official. There will be no action taken after.
Who are we inviting?
Carrie, Brad,
Dan, Curtis.